Hello and welcome to the class. Today my topic of today's discussion is class as a determinant factor in influencing the voting behavior in India. As we know that class is an important political category, and this category requires academic as well as intellectual inputs and to understand the India's scenario. India being a vast country with huge diversity in terms of ethnicity, caste, class, gender and so on and so forth. Therefore, understanding class would be of course an complex issues, but also is an important aspect. Well, the objective of today's class would be to understand the meaning of class, nature of class and its changing trends in India, role of class in Indian politics, and how class influence the voting behavior. Let us define a class. There are multiple meanings and definitions of class. It is also a much complex and contested concept. The concept of class has greater explanatory ambitions within the Marxian tradition than in any other traditions in social theory. Thus, the places greater burdens on its theoretical foundations. It is the most ambitious form. Marxists have argued that class or a very closely linked concept like mode of productions of the economic base was the center of general theory of history, usually referred to historical materialism. According to Karl Marx, a class is defined by the ownership of property. Such ownership vests a person with power to exclude others from the property and to use it for private purposes. In relations to property, there are three great classes of the society: the bourgeoisie, which is like who owns the means of production such as machinery and the factory building, and the source of income is the profit. Landowners is another important category whose income is basically from the rent, and the third category called proletariat, who owns their labor and sell it for the wage. Marx therefore, to understand what is class, class is basically a form of social stratifications which is defined in purely economic terms. The relationships are analyzed in terms of ownership and non-ownership of means of productions. The owners as the haves and the non-owners are have-nots. The Marx proposed that in all stratified societies there are two major social classes: the ruling class, which is like the subject class, and another the ruling class, another one is the subject class, which are definable in terms of ownership and non-ownership of resources. The power of ruling classes is chiefly derived from the ownership and control of the forces of productions, which is called mode of productions, and this power leads to the ruling class to exploit the subject class, in which the turn creates a basic conflict interest between two groups. Therefore, Marx also argues that political power derives from the economic power of the ruling class, that is, from the ownership and the control of means of productions. He suggests that the social institutions are also shaped by economic factors, that the ruling class thus dominate these institutions or social, which he called superstructure. Religion, ethnicity, caste, gender, these all are superstructure, and economy is the base. Therefore, these social institutions provide the tools for ruling class, class dominations and operations of the subject class. Well, there are different Marxian traditions as well as Weberian traditions. Max Weber, an important, very influential sociologist, German sociologist. Marx's main argument is the class is determined by the economic factors alone, whereas in contrast, in opposition to this idea, Max Weber argues that social stratifications cannot be defined solely in terms of class and the economic factors which affect the class relationship. Therefore, he is taking class or economic factors as an important category, but not the only category. Weber argues that class is only one form of stratifications, the other dimensions being status, party. Weber, like Marx, states that main class divisions are caused by economic factors, suggesting situations in terms of possession of goods and services and for income as a result of working a commodity or a labor market. Weber agrees with the Marx the ownership versus non-ownership debate, which provides the main basis of class divisions. However, Weber identifies four major or main classes as opposed to Marxian understanding of two classes. These classes are, according to Weber, the manual working class, the petty bourgeoisie, the propertyless white collar workers, and the dominant entrepreneurial and propertied groups. Weber argues that class is a distinct from status. Status is referred to as the evaluations made by other regarding social positions, which result into attributions of positive or negative social esteem. In Weberian terms, the consideration of status is important because sometimes status rather than class provide the basis of social group, which is a common interest and common identity. And furthermore, the presence of different status group within a single class leads to weakening of class solidarity and decreases the potential for the development of class consciousness. Let me give an example. In any context, for example, in India, there is a slight distinction of status. For example, a kind of respect a teacher gets from the society, though he or she might not earn huge money, but in terms of social respect or social status, he or she has a huge social status in Indian society. Whereas, for example, a businessman or business lady, and in terms she has or he has huge money, but in terms of social respect, his or her class nature is something different. Therefore, understanding Weber is also an important category in order to understand the various stratifications and understanding of the concept of class. In Indian context, defining class in Indian context is quite complex issues. We know there are so many variables. You have so different identities, the primary identity, secondary identity, the primordial identity, and so on and so forth. Class has come to occupy a key major area of interest while understanding the structure of society and the dynamics of power involved therein. In space and time, determining the class itself as nature as well. Therefore, understanding class is an important task for all, not only for political scientists, but also those who engages with the society and the very complex nature of class and the formation of the class. Professor John Harris argues that the concept of class, whether you derive from Marx or from Weber, refers to a significance of economic endowments, whether material means of productions or possession of particular skills, which you call human capital, or cultural capital, or referred to as a symbolic capital, or the social connections, sometimes described as the social capital, which influence person's power in the market vis-a-vis labor or money. Therefore, John Harris sort of kind of used both the Marxian as well as Weberian understanding of class to analyze the Indian situations. Therefore, totally, in order to understand class in India, you cannot totally rely on purely European concept to understand or analyze this Indian society. One has to understand the very nature and formation of class in a larger Indian context. Class structures and class formation in India, as Professor John Harris classified class structures into 4 major segments. The working class. Again, within the working class, you have the formal and informal sectors, the capitalist or big business class. The third category is the middle class, which is important and dominant class, and the last one is the agrarian classes. Now, understanding the working class in India, this is very important aspects to understand, analyze Indian politics, class and politics. The formal working class or labor force in an organized sector, which is also rapidly declining, and due to multiple reasons, due to the nature of productions, nature of capital, and also the partyizations of labor union. I mean, we have in the Indian National Congress, they control INTUC, INTUC, which is like basically labor organizations of the Congress party. Then again, in the Communist Party of India, Marxists, we know the labor organizations called CITU, Center for Indian Trade Union. BJP also controls, they have also labor union called Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh. So now you have a partyizations of labor, which basically restricts the independent autonomy of labor politics and their influence in politics. Within the formal working class, as Professor Reena Agarwala calculates that only 7%, and I repeat, only 7% of labor force as a whole, or 18% of non-agricultural labor force is in informal or protected employment. I mean, the kind of debates or popular media debates we see, like which will not tell us the real picture. Here we have empirical evidences that only 7%, and if you engage non-agricultural workers as well, it will up to 18% according to Professor Reena Agarwala, that engage in formal sectors. And then again you have a huge sort of informal, or which you call unorganized sector. The overwhelming majority of those in Indian labour force are into informal employment, which is unprotected by labour laws. I mean, they hardly get that social security, very little access to this social security rather. Professor Barbara Harris White, she estimates that approximately 83%, in 83% of total populations work wholly in the informal sectors. This is quite big number. In India, you have vegetable vendors, agriculture labor, and so on, and different kind of categories of laborers into informal sectors. Now you have a capital or big business class. This is the second category, as Professor John Harris, according to the classifications given by Professor John Harris. The capital or big business class. Well, there's a history of capitalism and history of big business class. We know the growth of Birla and then Tata. They have a historical rooting right at the time of colonial time and much before that. But in the post-colonial India, the post-independent India, you have again a new kind of business class which came up, and their influence in policy decisions is there. It's gradually influencing the political process. Maybe in 60s and 70s and 80s, big business class were there, but the political influence were not the kind of influence they are doing right now, I mean, in the contemporary India. And they also have their own associations, and we all know the Federation of Indian Chambers of Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which is FICCI, then Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, ASSOCHAM, CII, Confederation of Indian Industry, and more recently the Adani Group, the Ambani Group, and the Reliance Group. This all new big business group which has huge influence in the policy discourse, not only in the debate within the parliament, but also in different ministries. Now we see in Indian context, in the post-colonial Indian context, the state regulated economy from state regulated economy to more liberalized and open economy, which we generally call economic reforms. In the state regulatory economy, or we largely call a Nehruvian polity, Nehruvian economy, largely a socialistic flavored economy. There the business class were there, but their influence on politics was limited. And again in 70s and 80s, we know the term called license permit Raj, and the strong role of bureaucracy, sometimes we call red tapeism. And this license quota Raj to a single window system. Right now in almost all Indian states, including different other countries as well, they are opening up their places for foreign capitals, for big capitals. That's why you see our different state or government, including different ministries, they organize different kind of program, and all sort of a single window system where the industrialists or the entrepreneurs can come and invest. And this is not limited to the Indian capitalists alone, rather there are a lot of entrepreneurs, multinational companies from abroad as well. As Professor Vivek Chibber richly documented the study of relationship between the state and the big business, and he has shown that the contrary to the paradigmatic case of South Korea, the Indian state was not successful in disciplining business. That means the Indian political class somehow sort of failed, or it should not able to influence or not able to discipline the big business class. Well, this is the complex debate. Right now we are not going into that. The another third category called middle class, and this is a very important aspirational class, an important class. In order to understand Indian politics, one has to take a nuanced understanding of this middle class. The middle class falls in India middle of social hierarchy, occupies a socio-economic positions between the working class and the upper classes. Well, middle class is a broad term. Professor Barbara Harris White argues that this intermediate class, which also refers to as a local capital. It's not a big capital, but it's a local capital. Redefine the state's officials' development project, and they exercise considerable power to influence the policy decisions in different states. Michael Kalecki, who used intermediate class, the term intermediate class, so referring to a class of small landowners, rich and middle peasants, merchants of rural and semi-rural township, small scale manufacturers, and also the retailers. The substantial pace of growth of this class was primarily attributed to the incentivizations for private capital investment and opening of the economy to foreign investment. The total number of people in the middle class, approximately 30 million in 1990s, and 1%, which is 1% of the total populations of India, the percentage of those in the middle class began rising steadily. It's about 5% of the population in 2004. During 8-year time period between 2004 and 2012, the middle class doubled its size, and from 300 million to 600 million. And now if you look at the more recent data, you see a mammoth rise of a neo middle class as a new category within the middle class. In the contemporary political scene, middle class is substantially influencing the political process. The concept of middle class in India also is an upper and dominant caste as well. So you see a kind of a combinations of caste and class into this debate. Therefore, it is not an European idea of urban middle class emerge out of a democratic rights, a right-based movement who have capacity to influence the politics in a positive manner, in a positive sense, and also generate a civic values of solidarity. So in India, our middle class is not, don't have that capacity to influence in a positive sense that we have seen in the European context. Again, there's a last category by Professor Harris called agrarian classes. India still is an agrarian society, if not agrarian economy, but agrarian society. A large number of peoples involved in this agricultural process. Let me just give a bit clarity into this. There are common confusions about that we are around 70%, 80%, 60% people calls it agricultural or agrarian community, which is not exactly the case. Well, the people engage with agriculture or cultivation according to the census definitions, it less than even or around 10%. But people's engage with the agrarian sectors is something close with 50 to 60%. But that numbers reducing rapidly with this onslaught of neoliberal economic reforms. Agrarian classes are complex combinations of different categories. Such as the rich landlords, which we call in Indian politics kulak class, or a small landowning class, the marginal farmers, sharecroppers, in Bengali we call bhag chasi, and the landless agricultural labor, which is called khet majur. In 60s and 70s, we see an influence of kulak or big farmers in Indian polity. We know the Bharatiya Kisan Union, the BKU, and its leader Mahendra Singh Tikayat, and how they influence in the entire Indian politics, largely in North India, but it has a larger repercussions in other different states as well. Late 80s and 90s onwards, we witnessing massive changes in the rural society in general and agricultural society in particular. What changes we see? More urbanizations, people are more going to urban cities or into informal sectors, the decline of agricultural sectors, and also agriculture doesn't have much sort of revenues, much incentive. Therefore, all young generations or new generations getting some educations, they're moving into different sectors. The decline of agriculture, the impact of globalizations, economic reforms, long-term and short-term migrations, both rural to rural as well as rural to urban. These migrations and huge livelihood changes shifting from agriculture to farm sectors to non-farm sectors. We'll astonish to know there are many villages in India where more than 60%, 70% or sometimes even 80% people are engaged in non-farm sectors. Well, I'm not generalizing it, but it is quite true for common for many Indian states. Land is no longer an important or principal basis of status and power. We see the democratization of family, the inheritance law, land is getting divided. Therefore, it's neither is playing an important role, important category of livelihood, nor does it that political capacity to influence the everyday politics or everyday policies. But in spite of this, a large number of people do involve and engage with these agricultural or agrarian sectors as marginal farmers or landless agricultural laborers. The class of rich farmer coming mainly from higher ranking caste appears to have declined significantly. The farmers movement in India that have been successful in drawing support from rural classes across the rural classes, sometime on caste line, but it also invoked the imaginary conflict between the rural Bharat and the urban India, the Bharat-India distinctions. But in the recent years, we have seen that the mobilizations, the kind of power the farmers' union, the kind of power the farmer movement used to hold in 80s or 90s, even in late 90s, but that slowly, rapidly declining. As Professor Zoya Hassan argued and suggested with regard to Uttar Pradesh, that this form of mobilizations of class interest has been reduced by the or replaced by the politics of Hindutva based on the identity and many other markers of identities. The poor loosen the ties of dependence but exercise little leverage over the political space. Poor have refers to numerous rural laborers, small petty or commodity producers, and as Professor Daniel Thorner, American economist, he has written a very good book, The Agrarian Prospects in India, and he outlined the models of agrarian class structures in India, and he classified the agrarian structures in three structures: the Maliks or landowner, the Kisans and the rich peasant, and the Mazdoor or agricultural labor or agrarian laborers. Maliks who received their income from the land and kept their high levels of rent and the wage level of sharply low. The rent was paid by the peasant, sharecroppers and subtenants. This section is basically include big landlord and rich landowners. Kisan and rich peasant, this is the section which include working peasant who had a property affiliations. However, the actual rights, whether legal or customary, is associated with landlords. And the Mazdoor and agrarian constitute a large overwhelming chunks of Indian agricultural sectors, and this includes poor or less income landless laborer, sharecroppers also fall into this category. Lastly, the landless laborer also who work on land for wages. Now we come to the class and political mobilizations. Professor Javed Alam, in his book Who Wants Democracy, he argued there are two important shifts in Indian polity. Even as the elite are increasingly stepping back from the active participations, the less privileged class or the underclass or the poor in general are coming forward to engage with the democratic processes, and they are participating actively into the political process. As Professor Alam highlights how the poor return in every elections to choose their representative, and what the voting patterns reveals about the link between regional voices and national unity, between the politics of community and the ideal of citizenship. As Professor Yogendra Yadav, this phenomena of political participations called the democratic upsurge, of which basically a large number of people from the backward class or backward sections of the society participated in this democratic upsurge. If you look at the Indian elections, we'll see the poor queue up, or poor in the line for long hours in the polling booths, sometime in adverse weather conditions. On elections day, they wear clean or sometimes new clothes, as they may forego the daily wages to go for vote. Therefore, for them, casting vote is an important, important exercise or important democratic exercise. Based on the empirical evidences carried out in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Professor Amit Ahuja and Pradeep Chibber, they argues the poor, and I quote, the poor say they turn out to vote because it is their right, while the non-poor reports they vote because they expect material benefit from the state, some kind of access to the state, or because voting is their civic duty. They attribute different reasons for voting offered by the poor and non-poor. The poor mostly report the state mistreats and ignores them, yet make every effort on elections day, ensure they are treated equally. The recognitions the state grants to the poor on the elections day leads them to view voting as a valued right, one that gives them a rare chance to associate with those who governs as equals, and I unquote. Why poor votes? Responses from the margins. From their same empirical qualitative survey, Ahuja and Chibber, in their focus group fieldwork, when they ask the poor why they turn out to vote, they often emphasize the same motivations. It is our right. In fact, some respondents even found the questions very offensive. Who were to question their right to vote? As one poor villager in Azamgarh in Uttar Pradesh, he puts it, I am because I vote on elections day. Otherwise, what is my stature in this society? Many said that on the elections day, elections matter a lot to them. Only during the election campaign, they said, do party workers and politicians come to them, seeking them out. Another important participant said, an election is one event which ties us to the government. Politicians, people like you, journalists, even everyone comes looking for us. If we don't vote, there would be no elections and no one would even know our existence. Therefore, for poor, for the underclass, elections is also not only the matter of recognitions, but of the issues of existence as well. If I don't vote, one of the respondents argued and said, if I don't vote, I am dead to the state. Therefore, in order to felt your presence, in order to make sure that you are there, a poor, large numbers of poor do cast their votes. The class and voting patterns, as Dr. Sanjay Kumar from CSDS, Center for Studies of Developing Society in Delhi, in his book Changing Electoral Politics in Delhi from Caste to Class, and he argued with the large elections data about the increasing relevance of category of class as an important determining factors of voting in the context of Delhi. Politics in most of the Indian states is discussed mostly in terms of caste and ethnicity. Such analysis is so popular that we tend to believe that elections in India are only about caste and ethnic cleavages, and the economic consideration hardly play any role in voter mobilizations. The larger question at this juncture could be about the role of economic and social classes in shaping the cleavages structures of political dominance of the city. So this is an interesting debate. All people, they argue that Indian electorates, they only vote their caste rather than casting the vote, they vote their caste. The caste class dynamic in India has also changed because of economic policies of the government, especially in the new economic policies of the globalizations and liberalizations in the late 1980s. The urban centers where the impact of the process of liberalizations could be seen. The urban centers saw two kinds of movement, the increasing numbers of both rich as well as the poor. The post-liberalizations phase, he also witnessed a change in the political processes. Class and voting patterns, liberalizations and democracy are moving the Indian economy and polity into two opposite directions, two opposite poles. People who are excluded by the economy or markets are included by the politics of democracy. The rich dominate the economy now more than earlier, but the poor have a strong voice in the policy more than the earlier. This is a very interesting debate which is in India. That's why you see almost all the political parties, whether it is BJP, whether it is Congress, whether regional parties, almost all political parties are going for some kind of an populist, quote unquote populist kind of political debate, so that they could gather or they could capture the imaginations of these social constituencies. Well, people often use elections to choose their representative and the government, but rarely can they use elections to choose politicians that matter most to them. In Delhi, in the case study of Delhi, if someone belongs to the same caste, the voting patterns may not be similar. The kind of an homogeneous understanding that all people vote similarly, all people vote homogeneously, caste group or ethnic group vote homogeneously. It might be true, but it's not true for all the cases. Here, class is also an important factor. Middle and new middle class and their political mobilizations. Professor E. Sridharan, in his article Class Votings in 2014 Lok Sabha Elections, the growing size and importance of the middle class, he stated that apart from purely numerical effects, the middle class is electorally more impactful relative to the size because it's human capital and the opinion shaping character. Middle class are largely mobile. They could influence the media, they could influence the public opinion. The pro-BJP swing among the middle classes indicated that Lokniti post-poll survey, CSDS run post-poll survey, cannot be attributed to only an anti-minority shift or in a middle class opinion. Nationally, not to simply economic dissatisfaction or to a broader attitudinal shift towards economic liberalizations. Professor Professor Christoph Jaffello argued, this class has played a more important role than before in the 2014 elections, Lok Sabha elections. Class-based voting patterns have contributed to the success of Narendra Modi, and not only because he has capitalized on the support of middle class, traditionally which has been pro-BJP, but also because he has attracted large section of emerging new middle class or a new middle class, a large section of new middle class, an aspiring social category born out of economic growth of the previous decades. This new class has put the very notion of OBCs in questions. In particular, in the Hindi belt, in the North Indian belt, its stronghold in 1990s. The BJP benefited from the differentiations of OBC in the socio-economic terms. It upwardly mobile layered expected Modi's job and development in general. Therefore, within the OBC caste, this is very important, crucial matter. In the post-Mandal politics, even within the OBC, we see a more forward caste as well as backward caste. The forward class within the OBC, the forward caste as well as forward class within the OBC, they largely voted for BJP in 2014 as well as 2019 elections. Therefore, this is not only about the Hindutva based on only about a particular what you call Brahminical understanding of caste. Rather, this is we see a more expansion of class based sort of political behavior across India, and more specific in North India. If you look at West Bengal, in West Bengal, the left front government by the Communist Party of India Marxists, who ruled the state for nearly 3.5 decades from 1977 to 2011, largely on the basis of class voting by different socio-economic groups such as rural agrarian poor, marginal farmers, landless laborers belong to SCs, STs and large chunks of minority Muslims. Subsequently, Trinamool Congress, a government led by Mamata Banerjee, managed to secure large number of votes from the rural and urban poor. She has introduced many popular schemes such as Swasthya Sathi, a free health insurance scheme, free health scheme, Kanyasri for the female student to prevent dropouts and early marriage, which is quite rampant in different parts of rural Bengal, Ruposri and the Sabuj Sathi. All these schemes basically targeting the poor help Mamata Banerjee in retaining the power for the third term. Thank you.